The ship fell from the sky like a dying star. It tore through the clouds above Siberia and crashed into the frozen forest with a sound that shook the ancient trees for miles around. Metal screamed against rock and ice. Fire bloomed orange against the endless white snow. Then silence came, heavy and cold, broken only by the wind moving through the pine branches. Inside the wreckage, everyone was dead. The pilots, the passengers, the crew members who had tried so hard to save them all. 47 people had been on that colonial transport, heading to the new settlement in the north. 46 of them would never arrive. But one passenger was still breathing. Park Yuna was 4 years old. She had been sleeping in her mother's arms when the ship began to fall. Her mother had wrapped herself around the child, using her own body as a shield. It was enough. The little girl woke up in the cold darkness, surrounded by twisted metal and the smell of smoke. She called for her mother. She shook her mother's shoulder, but her mother did not wake up. Her mother would never wake up again. Yuna did not understand death. She only understood that she was alone and afraid and very, very cold. She crawled out of the broken ship through a hole in the wall. The snow came up to her chest. The forest stretched in every direction, dark and endless. She had no food, no water, no warm clothes except the thin jacket her mother had put on her that morning. She started walking. She did not know where she was going. She only knew that staying meant dying. 3 days passed. Yuna ate snow to survive. She slept under fallen trees, curling into tiny balls to keep warm. Her fingers turned blue. Her lips cracked and bled. She stopped crying on the second day because crying took too much energy. On the third day, she stopped feeling her feet. She was going to die. Even a child could understand that. Then she saw the house. It stood in a clearing that should not have existed. The trees seemed to lean away from it as if they were afraid. The house itself was made of old wood, dark with age, and it had no windows, except for 2 on the top floor that looked like eyes. Smoke rose from a crooked chimney, but the strangest thing was what the house stood on. Legs. 2 massive legs, like the legs of a giant chicken made of gnarled wood and ancient bone. They held the house up off the ground, and as Yuna watched, one of them moved. It scratched at the snow like a living thing. Any other child would have run. But Yuna had no strength left to run. She had no fear left either. Fear had frozen out of her, along with everything else. She walked up to the house and knocked on the door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door swung open by itself. Warm air rushed out, carrying the smell of smoke and herbs and something else. Something old. Something that had existed before humans had names for things. Yuna stepped inside. The room was cluttered with objects she did not recognize. Jars filled with strange liquids, bones hanging from strings, books stacked in towers that reached the ceiling. A fire burned in a massive hearth, and beside it sat a chair made of dark wood, carved with faces that seemed to move in the flickering light. In the chair sat a woman. She was old. Older than anyone Yuna had ever seen. Her skin was like tree bark, wrinkled and brown. Her nose was long and hooked like a bird's beak. Her eyes were black, completely black, with no white at all. And when she smiled, Yuna saw that her teeth were made of iron. This was Baba Yaga, the witch of the old stories, the terror of Slavic folklore. She had existed when the first humans built their first fires. She had watched empires rise and fall. She had eaten travelers who wandered too close to her domain. She had cursed kings and blessed peasants and danced on the graves of those who tried to destroy her. She looked at the freezing child standing in her doorway and said nothing for a very long time. Yuna did not look away. She was too tired to look away. Finally, Baba Yaga spoke. Her voice was like wind through dead leaves. "You should be dead, little one." "I am cold," Yuna said. It was the only thing she could think to say. The witch laughed. It was not a kind laugh, but it was not cruel either. It was the laugh of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "Sit by the fire," Baba Yaga said. Warm yourself. Then we will talk, Yuna said. The warmth soaked into her bones. She ate the soup the witch gave her, not asking what was in it. She drank the tea that smelled like forest and winter. And when she was full and warm, she looked at the ancient woman with her iron teeth and her black eyes and asked, "Are you going to eat me?" Baba Yaga smiled again. "I have eaten many children. They come to my door lost and scared, and I cook them in my oven and pick my teeth with their bones." She leaned forward. "But you are not scared, are you?" "No," Yuna said, and it was true. "Why not?" Yuna thought about this. "Because being eaten is better than freezing, and I am very tired of being cold." Abba. Yaga stared at her for a long moment. Then she laughed again, louder this time, a sound like breaking ice. "I like you, little one. You have something in you, something wild, something that refuses to break." She stood up, and she was taller than Yuna had realized, tall enough that she had to bend to avoid hitting her head on the ceiling. "I will make you an offer. Stay here. Let me teach you. Learn the old ways. Learn to fight. Learn to survive. Learn to make your enemies afraid of the dark. And if I say no, then I will return you to the human world, and you will grow up soft and weak and ordinary. You will live a small life and die a small death and be forgotten." Yuna looked at the fire. She thought about her mother who had died to save her. She thought about the cold forest and the crashed ship and the 46 people who would never see their families again. "I do not want to be forgotten," she said. Baba Yaga nodded, as if she had known this would be the answer. "Then welcome, child. Welcome to my home. You have much to learn." That night, Yuna slept in a bed made of furs from animals that no longer existed in the modern world. The house creaked around her, its chicken legs shifting in the snow. Outside, wolves howled at the moon, and deep in the forest, something ancient stirred. The earth itself seemed to sense that a change had come. A human child had entered the witch's domain and had chosen to stay. 20 years later, when the aliens came to conquer Earth, they would have no idea what they were facing. They would learn. The Varric came from the stars on a Tuesday morning. Their ships blocked out the sun over every major city on Earth. There were thousands of them. Dark and massive, hanging in the sky like metal mountains, the Varric were a reptilian species with scales the color of dried blood and eyes that could see in complete darkness. They had conquered over 200 worlds in the past 1,000 years. Their empire, called the Varric Dominion, stretched across 40 star systems. They had never lost a war. They did not know how to lose. Their supreme commander, Overlord Dex, broadcast a message to all of humanity. His face appeared on every screen, every phone, every display in the world. He was 7 feet tall with golden scales and teeth like knives. His voice was cold and sharp. "Humans of Earth," he said, "you have been chosen for integration into the Dominion. You will surrender your governments, your militaries, and your resources. You will serve the Empire. You have 7 days to comply. If you do not, we will burn your cities and enslave your survivors. This is not a negotiation. This is your future." The transmission ended. Panic spread across the globe. World leaders gathered in emergency sessions. Generals studied the alien fleet and found no weaknesses. Scientists analyzed Varric technology and discovered it was centuries ahead of anything humans had built. The numbers were impossible. Earth had 200 warships. The Dominion had brought 10,000. Humanity was going to lose. Everyone knew it. On the 4th day of the 7-day deadline, a woman walked out of the Siberian forest. She was 24 years old. She wore clothes made of animal hide and carried no weapons that anyone could see. Her hair was black and long, tied back with a cord made of silver thread. Her eyes were calm, so calm that people found it disturbing to look at them. She walked through checkpoints without being stopped. Guards would look at her and then look away, forgetting they had seen her at all. She entered the United Earth Defense Council headquarters in Geneva and walked into the middle of an emergency meeting of the world's most powerful leaders. "Who are you?" demanded the council chairman, a man who had commanded armies and negotiated peace treaties. "How did you get in here?" The woman looked at him, just looked. The chairman sat down without knowing why. "My name is Park Yuna," she said. "I will fight your war." They laughed at first. Some of them did. Then they ran her fingerprints and discovered she was the sole survivor of a colonial transport crash 20 years ago. A child who had vanished into the Siberian wilderness and been declared dead. "Where have you been for 20 years?" they asked. "Learning," she said. They tested her. They had no choice. The tests were designed for Special Forces soldiers, the most elite warriors on Earth. Yuna passed them all. She moved through obstacle courses like smoke through fingers. She defeated combat instructors without seeming to try. She looked at battle plans and immediately saw flaws that had taken generals months to identify. But it was the psychological evaluation that truly frightened them. The examiner, a woman who had analyzed serial killers and war criminals, emerged from the session pale and shaking. "What did she say to you?" they asked. "Nothing," the examiner replied. "She said nothing. She just looked at me and I saw things. Impossible things. A house with chicken legs. A forest that goes on forever. Teeth made of iron." She took a breath. "Give her what she wants. Whatever she wants." That woman is not entirely human anymore. They made Park Yuna a general. She built her team carefully. Lieutenant Colonel Kim Tae had lost his wife and 2 children when Varric scout ships attacked a civilian station. He was brilliant and broken and wanted revenge more than he wanted to breathe. Major Lee Hanna had flown the first reconnaissance mission against the Dominion fleet, dancing between their ships like a ghost, gathering information while they tried to kill her. Captain Cho Min-ho designed weapons and armor that pushed the limits of human technology. And Sergeant Beek Sahi led an infantry unit that had never lost a soldier under her command because would die before she let that happen. They were the best humanity had. Under Yuna's command, they would become something more. The first battle happened at Kuiper Station, humanity's outermost outpost, floating in the darkness at the edge of the solar system. Overlord Dex sent 50 warships to take it. He expected easy victory. He sent his soldiers with orders to kill anyone who resisted and capture the rest for processing. He did not expect what he found. When the Varric fleet arrived, the station was dark. No lights, no power signatures, no life signs on their scanners. The commander of the assault force, a decorated veteran named Commander Vex, assumed the humans had fled. He was wrong. Vex sent boarding parties into the station. 300 Varric soldiers entered through the airlocks, weapons ready, night vision activated. They moved through the corridors in perfect formation. Then the singing started. It came from everywhere and nowhere. Children's voices, high and sweet, singing words in a language the Varric translators could not identify. Old Slavic lullabies that Baba Yaga had taught Yuna in the long winter nights. Songs about forests that swallow travelers. Songs about witches who eat the wicked. Songs about the darkness that waits for those who deserve it. The Varric soldiers began to disappear. One by one, they vanished. A soldier at the back of a formation would simply be gone when his comrades turned around. Bodies appeared in places they should not be, arranged in patterns that meant something terrible in human folklore. Messages were written on walls in languages that humans had not spoken for 1,000 years. The Varric broke. They tried to retreat, but the corridors had changed somehow, turned into mazes that led nowhere. Lights flickered, showing glimpses of figures moving in the shadows. Figures with skull-painted faces. Figures that whispered nursery rhymes in the dark. Commander Vex made it back to his ship. He sealed the airlock and ordered an immediate withdrawal. But when he turned around, there was a woman in his command center. She wore a mask made of bone, carved in the shape of something that was almost human but not quite. Her eyes were visible through the holes, calm and patient. "You came to our home," she said. Her voice was soft. That was a mistake. Vex reached for his weapon. He was fast. All Varric warriors were fast. He was not fast enough. The Varric lost 43 ships at Kuiper Station. Some were destroyed by weapons fire from positions that should have been impossible. Others simply stopped responding. Their crews found later in states that made even hardened Varric soldiers look away. 7 ships fled back to the Dominion fleet with survivors who could not stop shaking. Overlord Dex received the battle report in his command throne. He read it 3 times because he could not believe what it said. His species did not feel fear the way humans did. Their brains were different, more logical, less prone to panic. But as he read about what had happened at Kuiper Station, something cold moved through his blood. Something that felt very much like the beginning of terror. On Earth, General Park Yuna removed her bone mask and looked at her officers. "That was the first lesson," she said. "Now we teach them the rest." The war had begun. And humanity, against all odds, had struck first. Stories spread faster than starships. Within weeks of the Kuiper massacre, every soldier in the Verak Dominion had heard about the human witch. They whispered her name in the barracks. They drew protective symbols on their armor that their priests had given them. They looked into the darkness of space and wondered if she was watching. Overlord Dex tried to stop the stories. He executed soldiers who spoke of supernatural nonsense. He broadcast messages assuring his forces that humans were primitive creatures with no special powers. But the fear had already taken root, and fear is very hard to kill. General Park Yuna knew this. Baba Yaga had taught her that fear was a weapon, sharper than any blade and longer lasting than any wound. You could kill a soldier once, but you could frighten an army forever. She launched her campaign. The Ghost Offensive began in the 3rd month of the war. Human ships appeared from nowhere, striking Verak supply lines and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. They attacked fuel depots and food transports and communication stations. They never engaged in direct battle when they were outnumbered. They simply appeared, destroyed something important, and disappeared. Lieutenant Colonel Kim Tae designed the tactics. He studied every guerrilla war in human history, every resistance movement, every uprising against impossible odds. He adapted those lessons for space combat. "We cannot match their strength," he told his officers, "so we will make their strength useless. You cannot punch what you cannot find." Major Lee Hanna led the strike teams. Her squadron, called the Night Riders, painted their ships black and flew without running lights. They moved through asteroid fields and debris clouds like shadows, appearing behind enemy formations and vanishing before the Verak could turn their guns around. Hanna herself became famous for a move called the Ghost Drop, where she would cut her engines and drift silently past Verak patrols, then reignite and attack from impossible angles. But the physical attacks were only part of Yuna's plan. The real war was psychological. She called them the Nightmare Protocols. Captured Verak soldiers were not tortured. They were not even harmed. Instead, they were kept in dark rooms and shown images. Images of forests that went on forever. Images of houses with chicken legs. Images of an old woman with iron teeth and black eyes. They heard stories, told in soft voices, about what happened to those who entered the witch's domain. Then they were released. They returned to their units changed. They would not speak of what they had seen. They flinched at shadows. They refused to enter dark rooms. Some of them stopped sleeping entirely. Others were found weeping in corridors, speaking in languages they had never learned. The effect spread like a disease. Soldiers who had never been captured began having nightmares about the human witch. Entire battalions requested transfers away from the Earth's front. Desertion rates increased by 300%. Overlord Dex was furious. He ordered his medical officers to find the cause, some drug or technology the humans were using. They found nothing. The captured soldiers were physically healthy. Their minds had simply been touched by something they could not explain. On the occupied moon of Titan, Sergeant Beek Sahi led the ground campaign. 2,000 human prisoners were being held in a Verak processing facility, awaiting transport to slave markets across the Dominion. Sahi took 50 soldiers and attacked a base defended by 500 Verak warriors. They attacked at night. They moved through the facility like smoke, appearing behind guards and disappearing before alarms could be raised. Sahi herself killed 30 Verak in hand-to-hand combat, using techniques that Yuna had taught her. Techniques that were older than human civilization when the Verak commander finally organized the defense. He found that his prisoners were gone, his guards were dead, and the walls of his facility were covered in symbols that made his scales turn pale. Messages written in blood that said, "The witch is watching." The prisoners were returned to Earth as heroes. The story of Titan spread across human space, giving hope to colonies that had been preparing to surrender. 6 months into the war, Overlord Dex made a decision. If conventional warfare could not defeat the human witch, he would use unconventional means. He summoned Drex, the Silent. The greatest assassin in Verac history, Drex had killed 17 planetary governors, 9 military commanders, and 1 emperor. He had never failed a mission. He could move through any security system, defeat any protection, reach any target. He was the Dominion's final solution for problems that could not be solved any other way. Vex gave him simple orders. Kill General Park Yuna. Drex studied his target for 3 weeks. He learned her patterns, her security arrangements, her weaknesses. Then he infiltrated her command ship, a vessel called the Bone Walker, that had become a symbol of terror across Verac space. He bypassed 17 security checkpoints. He disabled 4 guard stations. He moved through the ship like a ghost, invisible and silent, until he reached the general's private quarters. The door was open. Inside, the room was dark, except for a single candle. Yuna sat in a chair that looked wrong, somehow, old, made of wood that creaked even though no one was moving. She was looking directly at the spot where Drex was hiding, even though he was invisible to every sensor and detection system ever invented. I made tea. Drex did not sit. He drew his blade, a weapon that had ended the lives of emperors and generals. Yuna did not move. She just looked at him with those calm, patient eyes. "Before you attack," she said, "let me tell you a story. About a witch who lived in the forest. About the things she taught me. About what happens to those who come to kill me." She told him the story. It took an hour. Drex stood there the entire time, blade ready, listening. When she finished, she smiled. She said, "You can try to kill me, or you can sit down and have some tea and leave this ship alive. The choice is yours." Drex was silent for a long time. Then he put away his blade and sat down. They talked for 3 more hours. About war. About death. About the things that wait in the darkness between stars. When Drex finally left, he returned to Overlord Dex and resigned his commission. "What happened?" Dex demanded. "Why is she still alive?" Drex looked at his former master with eyes that had seen too much. "That is not a human," he said. "That is something older. Something we should not have awakened. If you are wise, you will end this war before it ends you." Then he walked away and was never seen in Verac space again. Overlord Dex stood alone in his command chamber, staring at the stars. For the first time in his long military career, he considered the possibility that he might lose, far away on the bridge of the Bone Walker. General Park Yuna poured the remaining tea into the recycler and smiled. "They are learning," she said to no one in particular. "Good, the lesson is not finished yet." Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and distant, but they did not seem quite as dark as they had before. Humanity was fighting back, and the universe was beginning to notice. 18 months of war had changed the galaxy. The Verac Dominion, an empire that had seemed invincible, was crumbling. Their supply lines were broken. Their soldiers were afraid. Their conquered worlds were rising up in rebellion, inspired by stories of the humans who had dared to fight back. General Park. Yuna stood in the war room of the Bone Walker and looked at the star map. Blue lights showed human victories. Red lights showed Verac positions. 18 months ago, the map had been almost entirely red. Now it was mixed, blue spreading through the red like fire through dry wood. But the war was not over. One red light remained brighter than all the others. Dex Prime, the Verac homeworld. "The heart of the Dominion. Cannot win until we strike that world," said Lieutenant Colonel Kim Tae. His voice was tired. They were all tired. 18 months of fighting had worn them down to bone and determination. But it is the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. The fleet around it is larger than everything we have destroyed combined. "We have to try," said Major Lee Hanna. She was thinner than she had been at the start of the war, her face marked with scars from a dozen battles. If we do not end this soon, our people will lose hope. We cannot fight forever. Captain Cho Min-ho pulled up technical readouts on his screen. I have been working on new armor systems, new weapons. If we can get close enough to the planet's surface, we might have a chance. But getting through that fleet... He shook his head. Sergeant Beek Sahi, now promoted to major after her heroism on Titan, spoke quietly. What does the general think? They all looked at Yuna. She had been silent throughout the discussion, staring at the red light of Vex Prime as if she could see through the projection to the planet itself. I need to go home first, she said. No one asked what she meant. They had all learned not to question certain things. The shuttle dropped Yuna at the edge of the Siberian forest. It was winter again. Snow covered everything, white and silent and endless. She walked into the trees without looking back. The forest seemed to recognize her. Branches moved out of her path. Animals watched her pass but did not flee. The wind itself seemed to quiet as she moved deeper into the woods, toward a place that existed on no map and could only be found by those who were meant to find it. The house was waiting. Its chicken legs were tucked beneath it, the wood dark and ancient against the white snow. Smoke rose from the chimney. The door opened before Yuna could knock. Inside, Baba Yaga sat in her chair by the fire. She looked older than Yuna remembered. Smaller, somehow, as if the war had affected even immortal things. You have come, the witch said. I have come. You're going to attack their homeworld. Yes. Baba Yaga was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled. The house creaked around them, settling on its legs. You will need tools, the witch finally said. Weapons that are older than their technology, older than their empire, older than their species. She stood up and moved to a chest in the corner of the room. From it, she drew 3 objects. The first was a mortar, large and heavy, carved from metal that had fallen from the sky when the world was young, for grinding your enemies to dust. The second was a pestle, smooth and dark, made from the heart of a dying star, for crushing their spirits. The third was a single strand of silver hair, thin as spider silk, but stronger than any steel, for finding your way home when the darkness closes in. Yuna took the gifts. They were heavier than they looked, heavy with meaning and power and age. Why did you save me? She asked. The question she had carried for 20 years. Why did you not eat me like all the others? Baba Yaga smiled, showing her iron teeth. Because humans are my children. All of them. I have eaten some, yes. I have cursed others. I have frightened your kind since before you had fire. But I have always loved you. Loved your wildness, your refusal to surrender, your ability to stare into darkness and laugh. She reached out and touched Yuna's face with fingers like dry branches. You carried that wildness better than any I have ever known. I saw it in you when you were 4 years old, half frozen, standing in my doorway without fear. I knew then that you would be my greatest student. Yuna felt something warm in her chest. Not quite tears. Something deeper. Will I win this war? She asked. That depends on what you want to win, Baba Yaga replied. Destruction is easy. Any fool with power can destroy. The question is whether you will be more than a destroyer. Whether you will be something new. She leaned forward. Remember what I taught you. Even witches have rules. Power without wisdom is just chaos. Victory without mercy is just another kind of defeat. Yuna bowed her head. Then she walked out of the house that had been her home for 20 years into the snow. Back toward the war, the assault on Vex Prime. Began 3 weeks later. Every human warship that could fly gathered at the edge of the Varric home system. 300 vessels against 3,000? Impossible odds. Suicide? By any rational measure. But the humans were not fighting rationally anymore. They were fighting like something else. Something older. Major Lee Hanna led the first wave. Her Knight Riders dove into the Varric fleet like wolves into sheep, her black ships almost invisible against the darkness of space. They did not try to win through firepower. They targeted engines, communications, command ships. They created chaos. Lieutenant Colonel Kim Tae coordinated from the Bonewalker. His forest strategy turned the debris fields of destroyed ships into traps. Varak vessels pursuing human fighters found themselves surrounded, cut off. Destroyed by enemies they never saw, Captain Chomino's new weapons tore through. Varak armor that should have been impenetrable. His battlesuits allowed human soldiers to match the physical strength of Varak warriors. Technology and creativity against brute force. The creativity was winning. The fleet battle lasted 16 hours. By the end, the human losses were terrible. Over 100 ships destroyed, thousands dead. But the Varak losses were worse. Their defensive fleet was shattered. The path to the planet was open. General Park Yuna led the ground assault personally. She dropped from orbit in a pod painted black, surrounded by soldiers who had volunteered to follow her into death. They landed in the capital city of Yex Prime, a place that had never known invasion. It's never felt the feet of conquerors until now. The Varak soldiers who faced them were the elite of the elite, the personal guard of Overlord Vex, warriors, who had trained their entire lives for this moment. It did not matter. Yuna moved through them like wind through grass. She did not fight like a soldier. She fought like something from old stories, something that had stepped out of nightmare into reality. The mortar and pestle that Baba Yaga had given her were not weapons in any conventional sense, but they were in her hands when she needed them. And the enemies who faced her fell and did not rise. Her soldiers followed her, Major Beak Sahi at their head. They pushed through the streets of the alien capital, past buildings of dark stone and frightened civilians. Sahi made sure no civilian was harmed. These were not warriors. They were just people, no different from the people the Varak had conquered. They reached the Palace of Scales as the sun set over the alien city. Its towers stretched toward the purple sky like black fingers. Inside waited Overlord Dex and the last of his guards. Sahi looked at her general. Orders. Yuna looked at the palace for a long moment. Then she said, "Secure the building. Protect the civilians inside. Kill no one who surrenders. And the Overlord? He is mine." Yuna walked into the palace alone. The doors opened before her. The guards inside looked at her and dropped their weapons without being asked. They had heard the stories. They had seen what she had done to their fleet, their army, their empire. They knew what they were facing. She was not just a general anymore. She was the witch's daughter, and the witch had come to collect what was owed. The Sanctum of Ancestors was the most sacred place on Vex Prime. For 10,000 years, the rulers of the Varak Dominion had come here to speak with the spirits of their predecessors. The walls were carved with the names of every overlord who had ever lived, stretching back to the dawn of Varak civilization. The floor was made of stone, quarried from the first Varak colony world. The air itself seemed heavy with history. Overlord Dex knelt in the center of the chamber, his back straight, his eyes closed. He had removed his armor. In his hands he held a ceremonial blade, its edge sharp enough to cut through bone with a single stroke. He had prepared for this moment. Ritual suicide before capture was the Varak way. Better to die with honor than to live in shame. He had chosen the location carefully. He would join his ancestors in death, and his name would be carved on these walls alongside theirs. The door opened behind him. He did not turn around. "So," he said, "the human which has come to collect her prize." "I have come to talk," Yuna replied. She walked around to face him, then sat down on the stone floor. Cross-legged, relaxed, as if she were sitting in her own home instead of the heart of an enemy empire. She looked at him with those calm eyes that had haunted Varak soldiers across the galaxy. "Talk?" Vex opened his eyes. "We are past talking, General. Your forces have destroyed my fleet. Your soldiers have taken my capital. My empire is falling apart. There is nothing left to discuss." "There is one thing," Yuna said. "A question I want answered before this ends." Lex looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered the ceremonial blade. Not surrendering. Just waiting. "Ask, why did you come to Earth?" You have conquered 200 worlds. You control 40 star systems. What did one small planet at the edge of the galaxy offer that was worth this war? It was not the question Dex had expected. He considered it carefully. She had earned an honest answer. Expansion, he finally said. That is what the Dominion does. That is what we have always done. We grow or we die. We conquer or we are conquered. It has been this way since the first Varak sailed across the first ocean in ships made of wood. We did not choose to be this way. Evolution chose for us. The species that did not expand did not survive. We survived, and mercy, Yuna asked. The species you conquered, the worlds you destroyed, the billions you enslaved. Was there no room for mercy in your expansion? Vex laughed bitterly. Mercy is weakness. The universe does not reward mercy. It rewards strength. It rewards those who take what they need without hesitation. He gestured at the walls around them. Every name carved here represents a ruler who understood this truth. Every one of them expanded the Dominion, crushed its enemies, showed no mercy. That is why their names are remembered. Yuna nodded slowly. I understand, she said. I was raised by a creature who also ruled through fear, who also believed that mercy was weakness, who ate those who entered her domain and showed no pity to those who were not strong enough to survive. But she also taught me something else, something that took me years to understand. What? That true power is not about what you can destroy. It is about what you choose not to destroy. She leaned forward. Any fool can burn a world. Any tyrant can enslave a population. Any monster can spread fear and death across the stars. That requires no wisdom, no strength, just cruelty and resources. Her voice was soft, but steady. The real test of power is restraint. The ability to win and then choose mercy. The strength to hold a blade to your enemy's throat and then put it away. Dex stared at her. You could have killed me already. You could destroy my people. Why haven't you? Because that would make me what you were, Yuna replied. And I am trying to be something better. Something new. She stood up. I am going to offer you a choice, Overlord. 2 paths. You can die here, in this chamber, with your blade in your hands. Your name will be carved on these walls. Your people will remember you as the last ruler of the Dominion. And I will have to find another way to end this war. A bloodier way. A way that costs millions more lives on both sides. Or you can live. You can watch your empire transform into something else. A federation instead of a dominion. Partners instead of slaves. You will not rule anymore. You will not conquer anymore. But you will see your people find a new way to survive. A way that does not require them to destroy everyone else in the galaxy. Dex was silent for a very long time. The names of his ancestors seemed to press down on him from the walls. 10,000 years of conquest. 10,000 years of believing that mercy was weakness. If I choose life, he said slowly, what happens to my people? They learn, Yuna said. The same way I learned. The same way humanity learned. They find out that there are other ways to be strong. Other reasons to exist besides expansion and conquest? She smiled slightly. It will not be easy. Old habits are hard to break. But it is possible. I am living proof that it is possible. Dex looked at the blade in his hands. It would be so easy. One stroke, and it would all be over. He would never have to see what his empire became. He would never have to face the shame of defeat. But he would also never know if she was right. He put down the blade. The war ended with a treaty signed in the ruins of the Palace of Scales. Overlord Dex gave up his title and his power. The Varak Dominion was dissolved. In its place rose the Galactic Federation, a union of humans and Varak and all the species they had conquered, working together instead of against each other. 10 years later, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. Colonel Kimte, now Admiral Kimte, commanded Earth's defense fleet. But his ships spent most of their time on peaceful missions now, escorting humanitarian convoys, mediating disputes between species, protecting trade routes. He still missed his family. He would always miss them. But he had found a new purpose in building instead of destroying. Admiral Lee Hanna ran the finest flight academy in known space. Human and Varric and a dozen other species trained together under her command. She still flew sometimes when she needed to remember what it felt like. But mostly she taught, passing on what she had learned 2 generations who would never know war. General Beak. Sahi led humanitarian missions to former Dominion worlds. She rebuilt what war had destroyed. Schools, hospitals, homes. She had seen enough death for 100 lifetimes. Now, she wanted to see life. Director Cho Minho headed Earth's Interspecies Technology Institute. Humans and aliens worked together in his labs, sharing knowledge that had once been jealously guarded. The breakthroughs they achieved together were greater than anything either species could have accomplished alone. In Park. Yuna retired. She built a small house near the Siberian forest. Not far from where she had crashed as a child, she planted a garden. She read books. She watched the stars at night and remembered the war she had fought and the choice she had made. Sometimes, she walked into the forest to visit the house on chicken legs. Baba Yaga was still there, ancient and unchanging. They would drink tea together and talk about the old days. About the lessons learned. About the galaxy that was healing slowly, from wounds that had been inflicted over thousands of years. "Are you proud of me?" Yuna asked once. Baba Yaga showed her iron teeth in a smile. "Pride is for humans. I am something else." But her black eyes were soft. "You did what I could never do. You took the old ways and made them new. You proved that wildness and mercy can exist together. That is not a small thing. It's far away on 100 different worlds." Children grew up with stories about the human witch. The Varric told these stories to their young now, but they told them differently than before. Not as warnings about a monster to fear, but as lessons about power and restraint. About a human who could have destroyed them all, but chose mercy instead. On Earth, children still wandered into the Siberian forest sometimes. Most of them found their way home safely, with nothing but strange stories and half-remembered dreams. But a few of them, the lost ones, the fierce ones, the ones with wildness in their hearts, they found a house that walked on chicken legs. An ancient woman with iron teeth and black eyes would open the door and offer them a choice. The same choice she had offered a freezing child 20 years before. Most of them chose to return to the human world, to live ordinary lives and die ordinary deaths. But some of them stayed. Some of them learned. The old ways endured, and the stars, once dark and threatening, now seemed full of possibility. General Park Yuna, the witch's daughter, the woman who had defeated an empire with fear and then saved it with mercy, sat in her garden and watched the sunset. She was at peace. The war was over, but the story, in ways she could not yet see, was only beginning.